Welcome, everyone. Will Johnson, UnitedAmericaFirst.com. I have another special guest with us, John Michael Chambers. This young man is the deep state expert. I bring him on multiple times to talk about the deep state. John, thank you again for coming on with me. It's an honor and a pleasure. Let's put his website up on the screen real quick. JohnMichaelChambers.com. JohnMichaelChambers.com. He's an author. He's a speaker. He's an activist. And he has his own broadcast, News Behind the News. Absolutely wonderful, John. Thank you for coming back on with me.
Well, thanks, Will. It's great to be with you, and I appreciate you taking the time to give me an opportunity to share with your viewers what I consider to be among perhaps one of the top three biggest news stories of the century that barely made the news, but it's going to make the news on Unite America First. May I continue?
Yes. So,
okay.
Go ahead.
Yes. No, you. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so I know there's a lot of stuff going on with the coronavirus, because that's like a lot of people saying this is like the biggest distraction known, in our modern day history, right? The biggest distraction. So what is happening in the background that we're not aware of?
Oh, that's the million-dollar question, and that's the right way to be thinking. People need to think just like that, Will. They need to ask questions and question everything. And when they want us to look over here, we should be looking over here. Well, I do want to dedicate a portion of the time we have together in perhaps a few minutes and start talking about one of the biggest stories that didn't make the news. But before we get to that, some of the things that are happening are, we touched on this, I think, last time I spoke, are the mass arrests have begun. Maybe not the high big names yet, but all the Soros mercenary foot soldiers in Europe, in Italy specifically, and here in the U.S. The 10 days of darkness that those that follow QAnon, spoke about starting tomorrow, March 31st through April 9th, I guess it is, 10 days of darkness. And this coincides with a lot of things, and I've written some articles on it, which is why the president in September of 2018 bypassed the system and pinged our cell phones directly. So there might be some disruptions of internet pockets. There could be an internet blackout for a few days. Who knows what that darkness means? But I do know what's happening behind the scenes is the deep state is getting rounded up. That's part of what's happening. And we cited very specific things last time, the crime syndicate in Italy, the drug cartels here in the U.S., and more. But there were three big stories, in my opinion, and I've been around 61 years, in the last 100 years that didn't really make the news. And the first one, of course, was May 24th, 2019, and that's when the president named people on a live briefing before the agriculture industry when asked a question about naming people that had committed treason, and the fact that the elected officials who commit treason, the Constitution states they could be executed. Well, the president answered that question live and named names. Well, that's a pretty big news story, and it really barely made the news. But you can find it on Right Side Broadcasting, and you can find it in the articles I've written. But that's a big news story. The second big news story was when Donald Trump Jr., for all the naysayers of Q, and there are plenty of them out there, although there's a massive movement into Q right now. But if your viewers and people out there listening, if you like the president, if you trust the president, if you trust that he trusts his sons, and that his sons are people of integrity fighting the fight for us, then the second biggest news story that barely made the news is when Donald Trump Jr. wore his Q pin on Tucker Carlson and on Fox and Friends, and then when Eric Trump wore his Q pin. That's a pretty big story. Now, the third story, which is right now, just happened 2 days ago. The Federal Reserve, for all intents and purposes, was just nationalized. This is a big deal. It affects every single one of us in a positive way and affects everyone on the planet. I don't provide specific sources, government documents, and news feeds to back up what I'm about to get into. But before we do, what is the Federal Reserve? Short story. 1913, we call it the Great American Coup of 1913, where the Federal Reserve Act became the law of the land, thank you to Woodrow Wilson and the Congress. Although it was legal, it was always unconstitutional because the Constitution states that The only Congress shall have the power to issue and control the value of our currency. Well, 107 years ago, we gave that away to a group of private international bankers. The Federal Reserve is a private bank. Period. End of story. People can look that up. Most people know that now. So we're going to talk about the Fed in a minute, but here's what's happening. The term that you hear sometimes is the global financial reset. And a lot of people say, oh, reset, that's the Iraqi dinar. I'm going to get rich today. I'm not talking about that. That's a different conversation. I'm talking about the global financial reset. I'm talking about taking the power away from the central bank system that doesn't have your or my interest in mind, creates booms and busts at will and moves money from one pocket to the other when they decide to. I'm talking about restoring power back to the people. That's what the reset. Now, here's very quick, and we'll move into the biggest news story with the Fed. And I got a Bloomberg article to cite. But here's what the president has been doing in 3.5 years as president towards that point of a global financial reset. Taking the power from the banks, returning it back to the people, setting trade properly, putting a death to globalism. Okay?
Before you
got rid of the
continue,
sure.
What happened to the last president that tried to intervene or make changes to the Federal Reserve?
Well, he got assassinated in Texas, Dallas, Texas, JFK, through Executive Order 11110, and that can be Googled. He was trying to restore additional silver certificates, if you will, silver to back our currency, rendering that a blow to the Fed, who had already seized control over the issuing of our currency. So the answer, Will, is JFK was assassinated, and some say that was one of the top reasons why. Now, Abraham Lincoln, to go back a little bit further, was also assassinated for the same reason, because he went after the central bank system to take care of all the money that was needed with the war and all. And he was created a greenback, a currency alongside of it, and they killed him for it. And then Ronald Reagan to move forward. You had Lincoln, Kennedy, and Reagan, the only three that went after this system. Two paid the ultimate price, and Reagan took a bullet for it. And after that, he started to go back to Fed policy.
He backed off on it.
For those of us.
So what does this? So yes. What does this leave our current president, Donald J. Trump? I mean, so if he just nationalized it, and it's in there, they're going to really be upset with him for doing this, right?
They are, and that's why 1 million troops have just been activated. Yes, they've been activated, because of the virus, but they've been activated for a lot of reasons. And the president told us when he was campaigning, he said, I'm not going to be like Obama and Bush. I'm not going to tell everyone all my military moves. Well, of course you don't, because it's military, it's intel, it's strategy. But you're right. There's a target over President Trump based on history and the move that he just made. So those of us of faith is ratchet up the prayers. But here's the thing: the president, the things he had done first. Remember, he's dismantling the structure systems. To give the power back to us, because that's what we once had till 1913. So here's what he did. It'll take me 20 seconds to run through this, and then I'll get into what's in that 1,200 page bill that just got passed, because that's how he took down the Fed. We'll talk about that. But here's what he did over the last 3.5 years. And all of these are globalist policies, crushing the sovereignty of nations and seizing power and control towards a one world government. What he did successfully, he basically globalism is now officially dead. And these are the reasons why. He got rid of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, distributing our wealth. He's defunding the UN. He's pretty much neutered NAFTA and replaced it with the USMCA. He's got China Phase 1 and Phase 2 in the hopper. Phase 1 underway, Phase 2 in the hopper. Regulations, he loosened the belt and got rid of a lot of useless and suppressive strangulation type regulation, which made it impossible for America to prosper. This is why we become the largest producer and distributor of both natural gas and oil. No one ever would have thought in 1 million years we would ever be able to say that. It wasn't even on the docket. That got accomplished sort of as a byproduct. But tariffs, he imposed tariffs on the tough countries that didn't go his way. Taxes. He reduced taxes and made incentives to corporations to come back. Trade policies are being renegotiated with the UK, with Mexico, with Canada, with India, with China. This is the dismantling of the globalist platform, and this is what he's been busy doing while he's been screaming about Stormy Daniels. And so that brings us to the Federal Reserve. A couple of days ago, in that bill that got us the $2 trillion rescue, and believe me, there'll be trillions more, was the nationalization of the Fed. Let's connect the dots. And there's more than Q, because some people don't follow Q. Okay, good. Well, we'll follow the bill, and then we'll follow the Bloomberg article. But we'll start with Q. Q Post, I think it was 3394, stated on March 27th, quote, "The Patriots are now in control of the Federal Reserve System." Of course, in my opinion, that's citing the bill that just got passed. And so what we see here is the Federal Reserve. We have to understand why it's a problem. It's a problem because they control the issuing of our money. They control our money. They control the interest rates up or down. They control the amount of capital that comes into the system or out of the system. And they control that. Well, that's everything. He who controls the money, I think, controls quite a lot. Well, we just took the control back. Thank you, President Trump. And so what happened here, and it was reported, as far as I know, the only one I was able to find was Bloomberg wrote on it, and it was picked up by Yahoo. So those that want to research this, I'll make it easy for you. JohnMichaelChambers.com. Click on blog. I wrote the article and put all the links in there for you. So this is big news because we've just returned the power of the money back to the people. Now, the Federal Reserve still exists. That'll go away later. But they have no more power. They have no more issuing power. And it gets better than that. I have to read a little bit to you here because it's so important.
Okay, while you're reading that, let's put your website up on the screen so everyone can see that, so they can go there, JohnMichaelChambers.com, right?
That's the article. Yeah, if they go on that website, they click on blog in the upper right, takes you right to that page you're looking at. And that's the lead article that I wrote just Sunday. We did it. Trump ends the Fed as we know it, and all the pertinent links are in there. But I'll sort of cover it a little bit here. The article from Bloomberg on Yahoo was titled "The Fed's Cure Risks Being Worse Than the Disease." And there's a lot of technical stuff in here, so I'm just going to glance through. Sorry, I'm not looking at the camera. I'll come back to you in a second. But it says here, the Fed is basically being nationalized. The Fed, here's what happens. President Trump shifted the issuing control over the money, because what the Fed has been doing is buying U.S. Treasuries, buying stocks, buying different securities, and directing the money, our money, inflating the dollar, and directing our money, we have no say in it, into as they see fit. The president just shifted that power from the private bank called the Federal Reserve over to the Treasury Department. Treasury Department is elected by us, it's we the people, and the Treasury Department answers to the executive branch, which is President Trump. So tongue-in-cheek, kind of fun with words, meet the new boss, not the same as the old boss. President Trump just sort of became the de facto chairman of the Federal Reserve. They no longer have the power. This is a brilliant move by the president. And again, while everyone's talking about all the pork Pelosi stuck in there, which we got a lot of it out, the real story was Trump put this in there and just removed the Federal Reserve from having power over the issuing of our currency. And that is a big deal. And furthermore, the $22 trillion of federal debt that the Federal Reserve and these Congresses over the years has created, which has destroyed this country, that's a lot of debt. That debt, bit by bit, over the next year is being transferred over to the Federal Reserve. So they're going to walk away with the debt on their balance sheet. We walk away with the collateralized assets and interest payment on their debt. It was a shift and a swap. Trump is brilliant. God bless America.
Wow, that's absolutely awesome.
Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. And, I can only imagine how it's going to upset, the deep state. And we're talking about those on the left as well, and how it's going to upset them. What do you think their next move will be once? And before we get to that, why do you think they didn't argue it when they were putting the bill together? Because, they had to have seen it. Why do you think
Well, here's
Why
the
do you think
thing.
they? Because I guess if they would argue, they would argue that in public, and then everyone would know that the Democrats once again are against the American people. I mean, but this is really huge. Why wouldn't they?
It
Why
is
wouldn't they
huge.
do it like they normally do and bring up a lie and say that President Trump is trying to become a dictator or he's trying to become king, he's trying to rule everything? I mean, that's normally their tactic. Why do you think they didn't do that this case?
Those are great questions. A few answers. First off, most of them don't read it. Number one. Number two, they read the sections. You got to read. You got to pass it before
There
you
it
read it,
is.
right? Find out
That's
what's in
it. You know
it.
what? That is the answer right there. Most of them don't read it. Most of them never even read the Constitution. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah, that's the first answer that comes to mind. This is because no one's ever asked me this. It's all fresh news. But the second answer, as I think it through, is they don't understand it. But at the end of the day, I don't really care. The fact that it's done is all that matters. And I'll tell you now to your other very important point, when you say, well, that Trump's a dictator, blah, blah, blah. Excuse me, folks. Wartime president. We are at war. He declared a national state of emergency. He invoked the Stafford Act and the declaration powers to tell companies what they can manufacture for national interest. Like GM, I think, is making these fibula, breathing devices. But here's the bottom line: he's not a dictator. He's doing what these powers afford him to do. Right. And the Constitution states the president can invoke those powers in national interest. And so guess what, folks? I know the story, all the smart Republicans and all your libertarian friends and certainly Democrats, they're all saying, oh, we got a dictator. What about future presidents that can do this? Hey, calm down. Calm down. We're not going to be in a national state of emergency and Stafford Act forever. Number one, we're in an intel war. And these moves are what's making us win it right now. We're gathering them up. The D-class is coming. Gitmo is ready. We just restoring power back to the people on the current. We just over the course of the year, vanished the $22 trillion debt. And in my opinion, come after the election, and perhaps sooner, things are moving so fast. Not only have they been nationalized, the Federal Reserve will no longer exist. That's what's coming. This was the first major step. And also, I forget if it's HR 24 or HR 25, but the IRS, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but the income tax code, taxing our income, is unconstitutional. That came in with the Federal Reserve Act. This is also going to go away as we ratchet all these things up in setting the global financial reset, creating a dollar to be backed by gold, silver, copper, and a basket of commodities as a series of steps towards something called a quantum financial system we'll save for a year or two from now. But that's what's happening. That's where we're heading. And what just happened is the third biggest news story that didn't make the news. Fed, rest in peace.
Wow. You know what? So it makes me think about more of the reason why we need to make sure President Trump wins in November, because they're going to try to reverse everything that he has done. He's basically giving America back to the American people, and they don't want that. They want to keep the power. They want to keep everything in their grasp, in their hands. They want to control everything. And President Trump is like, no, this belongs to the American people. And I can only imagine when this comes to the surface and they actually, when they realize how it's going to affect them, or when they see the effects of this, that they're going to really go after him like no tomorrow. So it's so important that everyone that's watching this realize that we have to vote them out. We have to get rid of these Democrats because they're going to destroy this nation. They saw the pathway through Hillary Clinton. They thought they had it through Hillary Clinton. Barack Hussein Obama had already did. Even Bush, and even before that. But Trump came and got in the way. And I hate to say this, but it's almost like instead of a nuclear bomb, maybe how do you say it? On a molecular level, how do you say it? On a molecule level, molecule bomb.
Yeah,
instead of a nuclear bomb, a molecular level. I can't even get it out. But you understand what I'm saying? It's molecular war, instead of nuclear war. So and it's like, maybe is it possible that they implemented this to get at him because the changes that he's making is not only affecting America, but it's just like you said, it's affecting the world.
You're zeroing in on the most important and critical issue because you're absolutely right. It's not business as usual right now, and we know this. But again, because of the powers afforded to the president, as we've just discussed, what's going to happen, what is happening, and what will escalate between now and Election Day is because, look, I believe Trump's going to win in a landslide as long as we all get out there and do what we have to do. But having said that, he has got to, because we're at that stage of the battle. Look what they just unleashed on us. They unleashed the coronavirus as a weapon, okay? It's getting very dangerous. So with this, we are now rounding them up. And I believe between now and Election Day, we're going to be at that next higher level. And because the Stafford Act states suspension of habeas corpus, we do not have to do due process. Now, I know that seems, dictator stuff. Well, excuse me. The Constitution said the president can invoke these things for the interest of the country. It's been done. He's doing what he has to do to protect us. We're taking the country back. It's exactly what you said, Will, and that's exactly what the president promised at his RNC victory speech 4 years ago when he said, at the inauguration, I'm going to give you back your country. And that's what's happening. And to make it happen right now, we're at a very dangerous time. That's why 10 days of darkness. That's why the lockdowns and all the different things. There's far more to what's going on, folks, than meets the eye. This is the greatest military intelligence operation of our time unfolding. And thank God for that, because this is how we're going to resurrect America, by ourselves. And that's what we're doing. And so I believe between now and Election Day, they will be rounded up. Not just the low-level foot soldier mercenaries, although that's important. That reduces bloodshed and it stops all those riots that were manufactured and all that crazy stuff. All right, that's now finished. We got that under control, pretty much. Now we have to go, and it will happen, again, suspension of due process, no grand juries required under this. You're going to see, in my opinion, and mark my words, you're going to see some people that'll go through the process, grand juries, trials, hearings, indictments in prison, and then you're going to see others, and there'll be some big names, that are going to be hauled right off to Gitmo. And then there'll be live streams, some of them. I sound crazy, but if you look in all the intel circles that I've been looking at over the last 3 or 4 years, you'll come to the exact same conclusions. And we have to take them down now, because look at the weapons they're unleashing on us at this stage of the game. I learned a little bit, and I'm just a layman on this, but 5G, if they turn it up a little bit, the source, the power of it, its ability to go higher gigahertz is what I think it is. It definitely has a massive negative impact in the cellular structure, if you will, of the body. Those that are carrying the virus, the coronavirus, getting certain levels of exposure to elevated levels of 5G, you bet there could be a massive problem. I think that's what Robert David Steele was alluding to. He touched on 5G, but we moved into a different subject. But that's something that is pretty concerning. And I've seen videos in China because that's where they have thousands of these 5G base hub stations. And just my opinion, I think they did a little experimenting because they don't care. But I've seen people just drop dead. I mean, no one's hit them, no trauma force, nothing, just hit the ground. Because of the impact of 5G frying everything inside the body, not normal levels, but at higher levels of the 5G being raised up on those that have the virus. I'm not an expert in that, but I've spoken to some people that are. And so in there lies the possibility of this thing getting out of control. But I somehow think we'll skirt that disaster. I think what happens between now and August will be extraordinary. And it's been happening already. And I think what's going on in the next 10 days is probably critical. We don't know what's going on exactly, but some operation is unfolding against the deep state during the 10 days of darkness.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see that take place. And with the 10 days of darkness, whatever that may be, like you mentioned earlier, because we don't know exactly. And without a crystal ball, we don't know exactly what the future is going to hold. But it's just really, really alarming that we're seeing a lot of this stuff that's taking place right now. And with the global market and everything, people rightfully so, people are concerned. I don't think people should panic. The bad thing is we have the liberal media causing people to panic. Reason why you're fighting over the roll of toilet paper. But, I mean, it is what it is. So I think if we can get everyone to stay calm and practice good hygiene, which we should have been practicing that in the first place. This is a year 2020. And you have to tell people now to wash hands. I mean, it's like where have you been? I mean, seriously. I mean, so maybe just thinking, we'll just go back to the caveman days, and because supposedly people were living longer, right? Or were they? But anyways, hey John, thank you for coming on and giving us all this wonderful information. Let's put John's website back up on the screen.
I've written about 450 articles. They're archived into different categories and sections. There's links into the News Behind the News YouTube channel, links into many of the public speeches I've given. There's quite a bit of information on there in a user-friendly way to navigate. And everything on that site, of course, is free. There is a paid subscription for those that are interested. But the most important thing, folks, to your point as we close out here, Will, is everyone just calm down. We got this. We have this under control. We're on God's side. Trump was chosen. We put him in office, and God never loses.
Oh, that's for real. That's for real. Awesome. JohnMichaelChambers.com. JohnMichaelChambers.com. Thank you again, John, for coming on.
Thank you, Will. Take care.